Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to NASA's Johnson Space Center. I'm Shaniqua Vereen, and I am pleased to be joined today by NASA's astronaut, Johnny Kim. We'll have some remarks from Johnny Kim, and then we'll have some Q&A in the room. We'll have folks online as well as on the phone bridge asking questions today. If you are online, you will use the hashtag AskNASA to join us. And if you are on the phone bridge, you'll press *1 to join the queue. If your question is then asked, you can remove yourself from the queue by pressing *2. Johnny, if you would like to start your remarks.
Yeah. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to be here. I've been back on Earth now for a little over a week and have mostly adjusted to gravity. It feels great to have weather again, to feel the wind against my skin. I'm here to talk about the mission. It is, I don't even know where to start. I think we had just a wonderful time. It was such a huge privilege to serve NASA, to serve public, to serve science and exploration. I think we can talk about science all day, but I'd also love to talk a lot about the human component of why we put humans in spaceflight. So with that, I think we can start.
Oh, yeah. So if we have any questions in the room, we'll go to the room. I see Richard, too.
Johnny, out of the myriad of experiments that you guys were doing up there on station, which one did you find the most rewarding and why?
Hey, Richard. I think if I tap into maybe the medical or physiology side of my brain, the ones where I had an opportunity to work in the life sciences glove box. And so that's a very high-tech piece of hardware we have in the Japanese module. And one of the experiments we got to do was MABLE. It was the study of bone stem cells in different media and how different environments could preclude bone loss, which would be important for astronauts and for people living on Earth who are suffering from bone and musculoskeletal related diseases. That one was particularly very interesting for me. I'd say also the one that I had a lot of fun with was maybe more the nerd and gamer side of me. And there was a great experiment where we got to interact with robots, with centers all around the world. And I had joysticks, I had very advanced controllers that were connected to these robots. And the idea was to see if astronauts maybe in orbit can interact with robots that were on the surface of, say, a planetary body. And if you could do various experiments or various tasks without having to step foot onto that surface.
Thank you, Johnny. Okay, we'll now go and take our first question from the phone bridge. First up will be Robert Perlman from Collect Space.
Hi, thanks for taking my question and welcome back to Earth. Due to the government shutdown, we really did not get to see you and your crew on November 2nd when the milestone was reached of 25 years of a continuous human presence on the ISS. Can you describe what you and your crewmates did that day to mark the occasion? And speaking of marking, did you designate the day somehow permanently on the station's walls or in some other means to mark this was 25 years?
Yes, we did. We weren't able to share it in real time, but the crew certainly was able to share it with the ground. We talked to the flight control teams all across the world to commemorate that day over space to ground. And then the crew ourselves, we got together and we broke some bread over the dinner table in the service module where it all started. And we tried to recreate a very famous photograph that I think of when I think of Expedition 1. And all of the crewmates, we got together, we had a great dinner, we had a good toast with juice, and we took that picture, which I think has been shared since then. And we've all have matching blue polos, and we're able to get the 25-year logo up in the background. And it was a great opportunity to reflect on just the past 25 years of humans in spaceflight. And it's hard to imagine, but many people today in this world, for as long as they've been alive, we've had humans in space, operating in space, living in space, coexisting. And I think that's one of the one of the greatest human engineering feats that we've had.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Robert. All right, next we'll go on the phone bridge. We'll have a question from Manuel from Exploration Space.
Hi, thank you so much. Manuel Masanti from Exploración Espacial. Congratulations, Johnny, on an incredible mission, successful, tons of science. But, I was wondering, what's next for Johnny Kim? Are you, besides spending Christmas and New Year's Eve with your family, do you see yourself coming back to the station to do more science, or do you see yourself like more targeting to the moon?
Hi, Manuel. I tell this a lot to people, and it might sound weird coming from an astronaut. My main drive for becoming an astronaut was not to go to space. Of course, that's part of the job. But for me, it was a much more intrinsic, deeper desire to be able to serve on the platform of public service that we have at NASA in the name of science exploration. And that part has always called out to me, and it still calls out to me more than ever. And so in that, I would love to go back to space. But it's not something that I feel that I need to do. I am very, very passionate about maximizing one's value and the people you work with, the value that they bring, and bringing out the best in everyone. I think that is one of the greatest forms of leadership that we can do for each other. And so that's what I'm very interested in. I think that co-aligns with our goals on the space station and with Artemis, our return to the moon. And so I'm excited for what that future brings.
All right. Thank you for your question, Manuel. All right, next up we have a question from online. What experiences on orbit surprised you?
How easy things were hard and how hard things were easy. Let me give you an example. So I can simply put this bottle of water down right here and turn my head, and I know it will be there. Okay. I can open up a bag of water bottles and just simply move it from one bag to the other very easily. That is extremely hard to do in space. You'll open up a bag and everything just kind of spills out. What you end up doing through experience, trial and error, is that you'll open up a little tiny slit on this bag and you'll take out the one thing you need and you'll quickly close it up because you don't want anything else to float out of there. And then I'll put it where I need to and I'll close that up. And then I'll open this up and get out the next thing. It's incredibly inefficient. But after you lose enough things in space, you realize that's the way to do it. That's the easy stuff that's hard. The hard stuff that's easy, I can grab this entire table, like if it was 10 times as heavy as this, I could grab it and I could just push it with one finger and translate it down the module. No problem. So easy things are hard and hard things are easy in space.
All right, one more from online. What did you miss while in space, and what was the first thing you did once you were back on Earth?
Okay, so I know what I'm supposed to say or what I should say, but I'm just going to be honest. Of course, I missed my family.
Right.
That's like the easiest, most authentic answer. I missed my wife and my kids and my dog, and now I had a second dog, so that was fun to come home to. I missed weather. I missed food. I missed cooking. I really like to cook. All of those other things. But the thing I really, really missed was unfettered access to technology. I'm just a big nerd and a technologist at heart, and I like to have 24/7 access on my own time through a phone or the computer to the latest LLM model or research or technical manuals, and that kind of access to information is what I have always craved, and so I kind of missed my phone. That's like, I know, healthy. I missed healthy access to phones. How about that?
All right, we'll take one more online for now. We'll go to James Dowling from West Hartford Community Interactive.
Yes, hi, Dr. Kim. This is James Dowling Healy, West Hartford Community Interactive. I just wanted to say thank you and welcome back, and congratulations on the successful mission and the new dog. My question has to do with adapting to space and then adapting back to the return and gravity, everything like that. I'm wondering what tips and tricks the other astronauts provided for you and what worked best for you, and if those are going to be codified officially or if they're just sort of unofficial advice from your colleagues.
Hey, James. So there's a lot of tips and we call it gouge, on what to do or what not to do. You know, I think the interesting part about it is that as humans, we all have different reactions to the same stimuli. So what might work for someone may not work for someone else. And a lot of it happens to be experimentation. And in fact, if you talk to a lot of the veteran flyers, their first experience or their second experience doesn't even match their first one, despite repeating kind of the same protocols they might have done. For me, on the way up, I did not take any pharmacological meds. I kind of wish I had, because I was quite motion sick once I got to the space station, and it lingered for a few days after that. I felt like I had learned my lesson on the way up, and maybe I need to be a better physician. I think physicians can be the worst patients because we just don't take medicine very often. But I thought, hey, I'm gonna try something, and so I took some motion sickness medications on the way down. Don't know if that helped, if I would have been just fine, but actually I felt like my recovery on the ground was drastically different than my on the way up. I felt very little to no nausea or motion sickness, some dizziness, and which is really attributable to the vestibular system. We have these inner ear organs with fluid called lymph in them, and they got these little hairs, and they tell us about acceleration. And that kind of just turns off when you're in space because you're not feeling the force of gravity. And that was very jarring, disorienting, but I fortunately didn't have any kind of motion sickness tied with that. As far as advice, I don't know. I think listening to your flight surgeon and just trying to experiment with what might work.
Thank you for your question. All right, we'll go back online. We have a question that says, what were some of your favorite moments looking out the cupola?
The auroras for sure. We get quite spoiled. Actually, one of the first nights, the very first day I had arrived, Don Pettit, there was a beautiful aurora, and Don had me close my eyes, and he brought me over to the cupola, and he said, open them. And it was the most beautiful aurora I had seen at that point in time. I had not seen that many in my life, but it was wholly unappreciated by me because I was very, very sick. And I was just like, it's like, Don, I think I needed another couple days. But it was still beautiful. And then we just continued to see beautiful auroras. I would monitor the KP index on the NOAA website. And we get very spoiled because after, the KP index on a scale of 1 to 9, 9 being very geomagnetically strong, so beautiful auroras, you get used to these auroras at 3, 4, and they're beautiful, but then you're like, okay, I'm used to it. I won't get out of bed unless it's like a 5. We had a coronal event, pretty significant one, I think in November, and I think it resulted in a lot of people in North America being able to see these beautiful auroras in places that you normally wouldn't. You can only imagine what it looked like from it was a KP index of almost 8.59. I had never seen it that high. We were ecstatic. NASA was a little concerned for the additional radiation we would have, but we were like, well, at least we get to see some beautiful auroras. So that auroras, and also, unfortunately, there was, I think, just a lot of natural events like hurricanes and tsunamis that we did see that I know is attributed to so much destruction on the Earth. But we were able to at least capture some of those moments in all their grandeur.
Thank you. And just as a reminder on the phone bridge, if you have a question, press *1 to join the queue. And if your question has been answered, press *2 to remove your hand. We'll go online for another question. And then we'll go to the room if the room has any more questions. Online it says, you shared a lot of wonderful videos and stories on your social media pages. What stories or discoveries are you excited to continue to share?
That's so easy for me to answer because it's not the story. The story of science is very important. But what I believe, now after having spent 8 months in space, is that the most important reason, the most important thing we can bring back when we put humans in space, on the space station, back on the lunar surface, one day on Mars, is the human story, that human condition we bring back, that human connection we make. I think that leads to inspiration, which is one of the most beautiful gifts we can give to the next generation. That inspiration to want to make the world a better place, to be the best version of yourself. That really touches me and my soul. And of all the things that we got to do on the space station, that was the most important part for me, was sharing those human components of the space station, of the times when we were around the Node 1 dinner table or the SM dinner table and us celebrating with each other through the holidays. Those will stick with me, and I think those are the most important aspects of human spaceflight.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go back to the room.
Richard Two of the Post newspaper. Johnny, a follow-up question. Say someone that's fresh to the Corps gets selected for a mission. What advice would you give them as someone that just came back from 8 months on the ISS and all these fresh experiences in your mind? Advice you give to them to help prepare them to be successful?
Yeah, Richard, I actually got to have this privilege to do just a couple days ago. Frank Rubio, a classmate and friend of mine, is the supervisor for the newest class of astronauts who arrived not too long ago. And I got to share 30, 45 minutes with them, and they were able to ask me about my experience and any questions that they had. And this question came up. And my response to them was that the most important aspect, the most important trait to have for a successful space mission is good interpersonal relationships. Is having the skills we term as soft skills. Is having the ability to listen, to lead, to have compassion, most importantly, have empathy. I think we like to focus on flying jets or doing spacewalks, doing the really fun and hard and cool things in space. And those are important, absolutely. But mission success is not so much dependent on those technical skills. They are important, but for the most part, I mean, as astronauts, we are trained to a very high level in our technical expertise. And so technical expertise and competence is usually not a limiting factor. What's important is how we treat each other and how we do in those teams. Because going to the moon and going to the Mars is going to be a very long trip in a very small space. And if you do not get along or know how to get along with your crewmates, that is going to have a much bigger effect on mission success than any other technical skill.
Thanks.
Welcome.
All right, we'll go to the phone bridge. I see Yi Hai online.
Yes. Hello, this is from South Korea. Congratulations on your return and success. Many Koreans are very interested in your journey. How do you think your Korean identity has influenced your life and career? And do you have any message for your Korean friends?
Thank you. Thank you for the very, very kind words. I certainly think that growing up as a Korean American has helped shape me become the person I am. And the way, when I think about it, I really think about empathy, because I, like a lot of first generation or second generation Americans who have had immigrant parents, you can kind of feel in between two worlds. And I certainly felt that was not unique to being Korean American. That's really, again, covers the broad spectrum of our backgrounds in our great country. But growing up like that made it sometimes hard for me to have an identity, where I didn't really quite feel I was very Korean, or I didn't feel I was quite very American. And that was hard. Those are hard. And I know a lot of people growing up have those challenges. And having those challenges for myself gave me a lot of understanding, a lot of empathy for that. And it's made me, certainly has had a strong effect on the person I am today. So I think that when you ask me that question, that's the first thing I think about is that empathy component of growing up in challenging times. What would I like to say to all of the South Koreans is, I know KASA, the Korean Space Agency, is just starting up, and I'm very, very proud of that, and I'm looking forward to that, and I think is reflective of the continued international collaboration that NASA has led in and the benefits we can have when we work together.
All right, thank you. All right, question online. What research did you start, and what would you like to see continue, and the real-world impacts that would relate to it all?
So when I think of real-world impacts, everything we try and do in space should have some return on investment to people, right? That we explore space for the betterment of humankind. The one that touched me while I was up on there was doing research into pharmaceuticals, because pharmaceuticals can treat a wide range of diseases. And one of them happened to be working on a cancer drug. Being in a microgravity environment, we have the ability to create very fine particles, these therapeutic drugs, that are able to grow in a way, their crystalline structures are able to grow in a way that is hard to replicate anywhere else other than in microgravity. And the idea is that, well, if we can copy some of these manufacturing methods that we do in space on Earth and increase the potency, the efficacy of these drugs, then we can treat more people. One of the more famous examples of this kind of research was a study on Keytruda, which is a cancer drug, and seeing how we might be able to better produce a more potent drug in space with those manufacturing methods, and how that might help patients here on Earth.
Thank you. All right, back to the phone bridge. We have a question from James Dowling. Healy?
Yes, hi. I got James Dowling Healy from West Hartford Community Interactive again. I just wanted to piggyback on what was said about the value of the social media stuff. I particularly enjoyed the videos where you kind of did a brief run-through of some of the experiments from beginning to end. That was really excellent to see the equipment. I was wondering if any of the experiments that you did were exciting, or you enjoyed them more than you expected to, or had surprising results. And then I hate to do this, but I had another follow-up question on the importance of team building. I know NASA has talked about the importance of food, especially for bringing everybody together and keeping astronauts happy. I wasn't sure what your favorite foods were, and if it was or was not the Thanksgiving special that you guys had.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, let's do the food one. That was easy. I like eating a lot, and the space station has a lot of great foods. My favorites were most of the international foods. So the Europeans and the Japanese and the Russians had really, really good food. It was very salty, which I happen to like a lot. The Thanksgiving present from the food lab here at Johnson Space Center, thank you very much, by the way, had some excellent food. Great turkey. My favorites, though, were actually sent up in my care package. And so my loved ones packaged kimchi and rice and and dried seaweed, and those are things that I kind of grew up on. And I just didn't have much of that up. There was nothing on the menu that was even remotely close to some of those things. So being able to have that a little bit at home was really nice. And see, so going back to, you had a different question about some things that I was really excited about. I kind of talked a little bit about a couple of them. One that I thought was really, really interesting was a thigh cuff study, where we put on thigh cuffs on astronauts at various pressures to reduce the blood flow back to the heart. And at a big picture level, the reason we're interested in this is because there is a space-associated process called SANS, space-associated neuroocular syndrome. It's a fancy word of saying that being in space has some maladaptive changes in our bodies. We know this. We have a lot of fluid shifts. We have bone loss, musculoskeletal loss. But one of the other things is that our eyes can be affected. And you can imagine if you're going on a long-duration mission to Mars and you see 20/20, but by the time you get there, you don't see that well, that can be an issue. And this study investigated using ultrasound how those thigh cups might affect changes to blood flow return to the brain, to the eyes, and how that might affect whether or not SANS can fully develop under those conditions.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Back to online questions. All right, we have a question that says, you talk a lot about the human elements and personal connections. Were there moments on orbit that you felt the connection strong?
Connection was strong?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Were there particular
think,
moments that you felt drawn to?
Absolutely. I mean, there were hard days up there. There were fun days, easy days. But, you know, when you put humans in a small tin can and you have them do hard things, despite how well trained they are, there's going to be some hard days. And those are the days I remember, not because they were hard, but because, or sometimes they were just bad days, really. So you would have a Monday on a Friday. I mean, it happens. But because those were the days you had the opportunity to ask for help, and your friends had the opportunity to give help. And countless times, my crewmates, Zena, Mike, and Kimia-san, who are up there right now, along with Chris, and if you're all watching this, I love you all. I miss you. Can't wait to see you all. Just have, you know, you're having a bad day, and they're like, we got your back, Johnny. and having that kind of love, it's hard to articulate how good that feels and how positive that kind of environment is to give your very best. Those are the days that will stay with me.
Nice. All right, and with that, it looks like we have one more question in the queue before we wrap. If you have any final questions in the room or online, we'll get you set now to ask your question, and if not, we will end our broadcast. All right. Checking. Okay, that looks like the last question for you, Johnny.
All right.
All right. Well, with that, we'll thank everyone who came out for this news conference for Johnny Kim's return to Earth, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.